to another edition of the Heritage Wealth Planning YouTube channel. Today's topic, we're going to talk about fossil fuels. Yes, exciting fossil fuels. But I built my website, Heritage Wealth Planning. The tagline is building sustainable wealth. Well, sustainable wealth can only come if we're having the ability to turn the lights on, to live comfortably, to have food, to trade, to communicate back and forth via email, via telephone. All this stuff takes electricity. Now, it takes energy more than that, but electricity is the foundation for a sustainable economy. Absolutely. Without electricity, it all goes to pot, and you can have all the sustainable wealth you want. It's not going to mean anything. And so one of the concepts I want to bring to the table for my clients and anyone else who watches on YouTube is that sustainable wealth is more than just dollars and cents. It's about the culture we create here in the United States. And unfortunately, I think the folks who hypocrites, they're hypocrites. They've been training us to see that renewable energy is the wave of the future. And they're not telling us what the negatives on that is, that we cannot continue to consume what we're consuming if we go to a renewable energy. We just can't. What we consume in a modern America, you'll never be able to produce with renewable energy. It's just not going to happen. Electricity in particular, but energy generally speaking. And for instance, you can't fly on renewables. It's not going to happen. So I want to show you something that is very interesting to me from an article that came out just the other day, today, from What's Up With That, or What's Up With That. Now, this guy is Anthony Watts, a very controversial guy because he's been attacking the establishment on the global warming facade for many years. 11 years UWT has been out there. Just a wonderful resource if you're open-minded. I mean, that's all there is to it. I don't care if you're a denier, like supposedly some of us on the skeptical camp are. They call us deniers. Silly. I don't deny that global warming or that climate change happens. It certainly happens. The question is whether human man-made carbon, CO2 is actually contributing. You can't prove that. So at the end of the day, I'm a skeptic. I'm not a denier per se. But what I love about Anthony Watts is he's taken all the arrows for all these years. And if you look at President Eisenhower's farewell address, this is the one that he talked about, the military-industrial complex. He also talked about a corollary of that for some reason never gets talked about, which is the educational industrial complex, where the educational departments are taken over by essentially what we in economics call rent seekers, people who want the government to fund their research. And the people at the higher realms are basically going to fund the research they think is going to attribute to their own belief system. And that's what we've seen time and time. It's throughout history. I mean, there's just no debate on this. If you believe in X, you're going to get the resources once you take over, and you're going to get all your underlings who believe in X to get money for grants and all that kind of research. If you believe in Y, which challenges directly X, or at least wants to hit more research on why X should be validated, and maybe has a skepticism of X, you're going to be kicked out of business. And we're seeing this in the environmental research area. We see it in economics. We see it all over the place. It's just, I mean, in terms of just nutrition, health food is all over the place and forever will be. I mean, that's just the human nature of it. But what I like about Anthony Watts is he's not afraid to challenge that because he gets funding from outside the educational industrial complex, which is fantastic. So anyway, a pretty interesting topic that he writes about today. Department of Energy. If it weren't for coal-fired electricity plants, the Northeast would have blacked out during the recent bomb cycle. And he talks and he links to this article from the DOE. Again, DOE's Department of Energy. National Energy Technology Laboratory found that coal power kept the lights on for millions of Americans during the bomb cyclone that pummeled the eastern U.S. from late December to early January. And so what I want to do is I want to look up this PDF from the, and you can see it's a long document here. It's 46 pages. And I'm just going to go over a couple of things from the executive summary because I find it actually fascinating. And it bothers me actually that so many people are sucked into this silliness that, if we just have PV panels on our rooftops, we're going to be able to live like we are. We're not. If you want to go that route, that's fine. But don't pretend that there won't be some sacrifices need to be made. The simple facts are, if you're living on 30 kilowatt hours a day, you're not going to be able to generate that with renewables. It's not going to happen. You're not going to get wind. You're not going to get solar or hydro. They're just, those three things are not going to give you the amount of electricity. That's just electricity. We're not talking about flying, the transportation of goods across seas, the transportation of hauling from New York to Idaho, lobsters or whatever. We're just talking about the basic electricity that I'm using to generate what I can do here today. So it's interesting because what they talk about, this is just the executive summary, across the 6 ISOs, and ISOs are independent system operators, coal provided 55% of incremental daily generation needed, and combined fossil and nuclear energy plants provided 89% of electricity during peak demand across all ISOs. Across all ISOs, with 69% coming from fossil energy plants. This is during the bomb cyclone when we had those horrific cold temperatures in the Northeast. But here's the thing that ticks me off. Due to natural gas pipeline and delivery constraints, fuel oil provided almost all the surge capacity in the Northeast, barely enabling ISOs in New England in particular to meet demand as it experienced rapid depletion of its fuel oil storage reserves. So due to natural gas pipeline and delivery constraints, fuel oil provided almost all the surge capacity needed to basically allow people to keep their homes warm so they don't die and freeze to death. Barely enabling the ISO in New England in particular to meet demand as it experienced rapid depletion of its fuel oil storages. So what's this thing with pipelines? Yeah, we've been hearing a lot about that in the news last 5-10 years. You know, the Trans-Pacific Pipe, whatever that one coming from Canada. I forgot what it's called off the top of my head. Going through Pennsylvania, the one in Dakota. We got all these protesters out who had a bunch of trash. They just say they protect the environment, but they're leaving all kinds of trash there as they left. Just horrible people doing this stuff. I mean, if you really protect the environment, why just leaving all this trash on the side? Horrific. That's what they're stopping. They're stopping the pipelines from bringing natural gas from point A, the producer in Canada, through Nebraska, up through the state of New York and into Boston and northern New England. And because Governor Cuomo in New York is saying we're restricting fracking, but we're also not going to allow pipelines to go through the state of New York, those people up there are not getting the accessible natural gas they need. And because of that, they were barely able to have enough to heat their homes in that one time. But it gets worse. The value of fuel-based power generation resilience during this event was estimated at $3.5 billion. Lack of sufficient natural gas pipeline infrastructure and the surge in natural gas demand for heating led to sharp increases in natural gas spot prices exceeding 300% across the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. So you want to help poor people? You get them natural gas that can heat their homes. Let me show you my own blog. I did this about 2 months ago. Article, Global Warming Crusade is literally freezing poor people. That's the spot prices right there. Look at that. Flat, 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 boom. Flat, 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 boom. That's what happened right there because the natural gas demand was so high and the supply was so low. What happens? I've told this a million times. When supply is up and demand is low, and when demand is up and supply is low. Well, when demand is up and supply is low, prices go through the roof. Demand is up because people need to heat their homes. Supply is low. Prices go through the roof where people pay anything to heat their houses, anything. When supply is high and demand's low, the prices go through the floor because people say, I don't need this. I don't need your supply. I'm not going to pay for it. But this is exactly what happened. Look at that. Spot prices of Boston, New England ISO right there because the demand was super exceeding the supply because of what they've done to restrict the natural gas pipelines. Natural gas, let's see, I want to read this one right here. No. Available wind energy. Now we got all these people, windmills. Look at this. Available wind energy was 12% lower during the bomb cyclone than for a typical winter day, resulting in a need for dispatchable fossil fuel generation to make up this, in addition to its resiliency role in meeting the greater demand of the event. That's real world, folks. Wind, hydro, and PV, photovoltaic, that is fantasy land. Yeah, hey, if you want to go back to what living on, 1,000 kilowatt hours a year like they do in India, more power to you. I guarantee that's not what these people were trying to do in New England when the bomb cyclone went through. And they needed heat, and they needed it desperately. And it wasn't there. And the windmills didn't do anything. In fact, the windmills actually declined in the amount of production it created. The amount of electricity generation on the windmills were down 12% during that bomb cyclone when they needed it the most. And yet on top of that, they did not have natural gas pipelines coming through. On top of that, their oil reserves are almost depleted. On top of that, the sun wasn't shining, so there's no photovoltaic to provide their solar panels with any electricity generation. Not that that'd be used to heat your house anyway. Here's the problem. Retirement of aging coal and nuclear generation infrastructure may be underestimated, which could give rise to reliability concerns and inability to meet projected electricity demand. So we talked about steel, and I got a link up there for other videos I've done for steel. We need steel to keep our electricity functioning, but electricity is not a great use for heating your home. Natural gas and oil are what heats your home. Electricity can heat pumps work off electricity, but they're not going to get, when it gets bomb cyclone cold, you need something else. You need either wood stove, wood pellets, oil, natural gas. You can't use an electric furnace to give an adequate heat. I mean, you won't die, but it's just not going to be very comfortable. But even here, retiring of aging coal and nuclear generation infrastructure may be underestimated, which could give rise to reliability concerns and the inability to meet projected electricity demand. All I got to say, folks, that's why I live in the South. Bomb cyclones aren't likely to happen here. If they do, your firewood in your fireplace should give you adequate heating for the short amount of time you get that massive cold streak coming through. If you're up north and you're relying on your heat pump, I hope you have a secondary source of heat generation, because right now, if coal plants go offline, nuclear goes offline, and on top of that, you don't have a natural gas pipeline coming through very sufficiently, and oil is being depleted. What are you going to do? I mean, think about this. What are you going to do to heat your homes? And that's a mission I have, building sustainable wealth. That's the whole point of my being here, is I want to help people prepare for the inevitable, that they're going to need money. They don't want to run out of money, but they're also going to need to live comfortably. And one of the ways to live comfortably is having a heat source if you live in cold regions. Now, you can counter that. Say, well, you live in the South, it gets hot. All right, well, you can use electricity to cool things a whole lot better than you can use electricity to heat things. Even that, a fan to just blow some ambient temp wind on you to cool you off a little bit, that's easy. You can charge that up with a 12-volt battery, no problem at all. In fact, their solar photovoltaic panels can work just fine. Put some fan on you. I mean, that's no big deal in the least. It's the heating. It's the heating that really is troublesome for a good proportion of the United States, because don't forget that Northeast corridor, that's where a significant population live up there from New York and going up north, even from DC going up there. And your photovoltaic panels on your roof, not going to get the job done. You need other things. You need coal. We need steel, from which coal can be made to give us the way to fix our aging power plants, transformers, to add to the grid, to make our grids more reliable. Because remember, the average large power transformer today is 30 years. 30 years. That's the average. The ones in the Northeast are certainly older than that. And so I don't know what it is out there, but if you have an aging large power transformer out in the Northeast, and on top of that, you're restricting natural gas demand or pipeline, you're restricting, and then the aging coal and nuclear generation, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? So I just want to talk about that because I think it's pretty interesting. Here's actually a pretty good article from in January that I want to share with you too. And I'll put all these in the show notes down here if I can get this to crank up. Cold winters are testing the limits of U.S. energy grid. And I talked about that in a blog post, again, from one of my blogs I've done. And then this is my favorite one, though, right here. So let's just see if he's got a summary on this real quick. Cold winters are testing the limits of energy grid. It's giving me a hard time. Yeah. Let's see. The Arctic air that's frozen northeast U.S. has, over the first weeks of 2018, has prompted New Englanders to crank up the heat. and New England utility companies to scramble for fuel. Well, we just talked about that. They almost depleted their the oil capacity. They didn't have natural gas coming in because the pipelines have been restricted. They were in a world of hurt. Watch this right here. Now, this is the best article. If you really want to start this stuff, electric grid large power transformers can take up to 2 years to build. And this is what got me kicked off on reading about the whole things with electric power, large electric grid, or electric grid and large power transformers, the need for steel, the need for coal, the need for resiliency, and fossil fuels are what give us resiliency for sure. So this is a great one. I love this article. If you're interested in electricity, you're interested in energy in particularly, or energy in general, electricity in particularly, this is a couple of great reads here. And of course, just go to my blog. We even talk about China here because China reverts back to coal because their renewables weren't getting the job done to keep people from freezing to death. And it just bothers me. All right. Well, here in the New England ISO warns us, reliable power grid operations expected this winter. Resource should be adequate unless unexpected outages or fuel delivery constraints occur, which is exactly what happened. And they just barely made it through. And if more grid stuff goes offline, coal, nuclear, less natural gas pipeline, it's going to be worse next year. So be prepared. So motto number one in building sustainable wealth is be prepared. All right. Well, I hope you found this of interest. Not a typical financial planning topic, but something that's near and dear to my heart. What are you doing to prepare when the lights go out? The electricity goes out. Do you got enough food stored up for 3 days? You got enough water? Do you have iodine tablets? Do you have battery power? What do you have in case the electricity goes out? Do you have flashlights available? Headlamps you can put on your head to look around. What happens if the sump pump stops because the electricity went out and now you got a flood in your basement? What are you doing to prepare? Being prepared is not make you a survivor freak. Being prepared just says I have this under control when things go sour, especially when I'm least prepared for it. So just make sure you got your stuff together. And if not, we got lots of resources I can provide to you to help you along that journey. All right. Hope this is helpful. Don't forget to subscribe. Thumbs up are always helpful for sure. Comment down below, especially you who are big on photovoltaic. Now, photovoltaic is just solar panels, but there's two types of solar. You got solar thermal, which is actually pretty good to heat water. And that could be used, well, I guess I don't have it, but for radiate, the old school radiation, that's actually not a bad heating source for sure. Solar thermal is fine, but if you have solar thermal, power, solar panels for thermal, well, you can't use that space for electricity generation. So you can have one. They're mutually exclusive, essentially. You don't have so much space. Solar thermal is going to mean inherently you can't use that same space for solar electricity generation. So you have to choose between the two. I would choose, frankly, the solar thermal as opposed to solar electricity. But at the end of the day, you have to choose one of those two. But if you have experience on that, I'd love to hear what your experience is. I talked to a lot of guys who are very interested in going off grid, very interested in solar, and I get it. I have a couple panels. I'm a fan of them, but at the end of the day, they don't get the job done when you need to keep your house warm so your kids don't freeze to death. So comment, and of course, always subscribe and hit notification to be notified of future content on the Heritage Wealth Planning YouTube channel. Thanks, guys.